Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies, and it's our annual What Should Philadelphia Phillies Fans Be Thankful For? I understand the season didn't have the greatest ending, but there are still plenty of things that you should be thankful for as a Philadelphia Phillies fan. We'll talk about them on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Happy Turkey Day. I'm probably posting this on Friday, so maybe the day after Thanksgiving. So happy Black Friday as well. But recording this on Thanksgiving. Hopefully you enjoy your holiday. More about that in a second, but you may know me from some of my other sports talk work in radio here in Philadelphia. I've been on the air with 97.5 The Fanatic for 5 years doing sports talk about Philly sports in general. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 years, and this is my third year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're consuming this in podcast form. If you're watching on YouTube and haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's free. It's easy. It gets you notifications when new episodes are posted. It really helps me out. So if you enjoy the content, hitting that subscribe button is the best way you can help support Locked On Phillies. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can keep the season going with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So yes, this is the Thanksgiving episode for Locked On Phillies. I do this every year, and it's not so much a State of the Union address, but it's more of a what should we be thankful for type of thing. You know, you sit down on Thanksgiving and you look around the table and you see hopefully all your relatives and family, or at least you see good food. Whatever you do for Thanksgiving, it's a time where you get a chance to reflect on what you're thankful for. And I'm very thankful for all of you taking the time to listen to Locked On Phillies. That's not just like tongue-in-cheek. No, like I'm grateful very much. There are so many people out there that subscribe to Locked On Phillies and tune into episodes and listen in. So thank you for going ahead and making this worth it for me. I appreciate you all very, very much. Even if you've only watched 1 second of one episode, anyone who supports this, I appreciate you. But the most important thing that we're going to get into today is how the Philadelphia Phillies should make us thankful right now, because there are times where we get really angry with this organization and this team and disappointed and upset with individual players, and they came up short and they didn't do this and they didn't do that. And those are completely valid feelings. But at the end of the day, as a sports fan, you should be getting, and notice the keyword should, you should be getting more out of your experience positively than negatively. I mean, just like anything else in life, if you have more negative thoughts and reactions to the Philadelphia Phillies, why are you a Phillies fan? Like, and that's partially on the team, but like that's for the Chicago White Sox to talk about. That's for the Oakland Athletics, soon to not be the Oakland Athletics, to talk about. For the Philadelphia Phillies, there are plenty of things to be thankful for. Let's jump into those here in a second. We're also going to evaluate Garrett Stubbs' 2024 season. That is not something to be thankful for, but we'll talk about that. And then I'm also going to give you an update as the calendar gets ready to shift to December, what we're going to be doing over the next month of the offseason, what the Phillies could be doing over the next month of the offseason. So a lot to get into, but what should Philadelphia Phillies fans be thankful for? The first thing that you always have to start with is the ownership of this franchise. John Middleton is the head of the snake for the Philadelphia Phillies, and he does an amazing job of getting money allocated to where it needs to be. If you've got big name guys that you want to pay, go out and pay them. If you've got big name free agents that you've got to overpay to sign to get here, but you say, well, listen, I make a lot of money and we're comfortable going into a luxury tax, he goes and does that. If you have a guy that's good in your organization, he pays them so they don't go elsewhere. Like, John Middleton wants to win. He does everything he can from the owner's box to try and win. He is a true Philadelphia Phillies fan. And also, he's a guy that's not afraid to face the people when the team is playing good, when the team is playing poorly. He's a guy that can be seen around Citizens Bank Park. How often do you see owners roaming around the concourse? Like, you don't see it in sports ever. And John Middleton does it. He is the guy that makes all of this tick because he's willing to throw money up. And in baseball, that is not a guarantee. Basically, there are two things that are the biggest determinants of whether or not your baseball team is going to compete. Are you a major market team that can make all this money? Or do you have an owner that's willing to spend the money you make? Those are the two biggest things. So it's a non-salary cap league. So John Middleton's always the number one thing you should be thankful for. The number two thing you should be thankful for is the Philadelphia Phillies won their division for the first time in 13 years. I know it didn't end the way that you wanted it to, but guess what, guys? 13 years ago, you know what I was doing? It's 2024, so that was 2011. I was a junior in high school the last time the Philadelphia Phillies were able to say they were NL East champs. Now, it feels hollow considering the goal was so much more than that, but don't turn your nose up at the division. Don't do it. I'm not saying buy a bunch of hats and shirts and act like we won the World Series. No, but don't act like they didn't accomplish something. First time in 13 years to be able to say the NL East runs through Philadelphia, that's a pretty cool feeling. That's something that's worth saying, okay, we know that wasn't the goal. I'm not going to gloat about it, but when you sit at home on the couch and you just kind of like think about this past year, that is something to be thankful for. Winning 95 games and winning the division and doing all that is just, it's definitely a testament to the quality of team that they put together. And it sucks that it didn't end the way you wanted it to in the postseason. And any of us wanted it to in the postseason, but that doesn't mean that you shun the journey that got us here. We should be thankful for the division title. Only 6 teams in baseball get to say that they're division title winners. And that's pretty darn good company to be in. It's not the worst consolation prize. I'm not trying to tell you the season was a success because they won the division. It was not. There's one successful season. It's if they win the World Series. But I will say it's an accomplishment and one that we should be proud of as fans. The other things that we should be thankful for, let's talk about the all-star level talent that's still on the squad going into 2025. We'll put Alec Boehm to the side of the conversation because we don't know if he's going to be on the team. But guys like Christopher Sanchez and Zach Wheeler and Matt Strahm and Bryce Harper and Trey Turner, guys like that are going to be all-star level talent for a long time. Ranger Suarez, who hopefully doesn't get traded. Like, these are all guys that are next level talent. The Phillies had either the most or tied for the most all-stars in all of baseball this past year. Almost the entire National League infield starting was the Philadelphia Phillies guys. Alec Boehm at third, Trey Turner at shortstop, Bryce Harper at first. There's high-level talent on this team. You should be thankful to each and every one of those players for making this franchise completely relevant year in and year out. And that's something that you should 100% look at and say, wow, it's so cool to be able to watch some of the great teams that we've ever seen put on Philadelphia Phillies uniforms in like consecutive years. 22 was a special run, but 2023 they were stacked. In 2024 they were stacked, and in 2025 the Philadelphia Phillies are going to be stacked. I'm telling you right now, they're going to be a talented baseball team once again. So be thankful for the era of Phillies baseball you're witnessing. I think that's important too. Be thankful for what we had as far as a summer at the ballpark. Listen, I know it got kind of sketchy at the end there, and we had like 2 months of really rough play, but how fun was it to start your summer off looking at this baseball team and saying, are we witnessing the best Philadelphia Phillies team in franchise history? Like, there are some moments, some really special moments this past season when this team was red hot, where we were talking about the greatest stretch of Phillies baseball we've ever seen and potentially the greatest season. And we know that went down the drain, but still, do you know how good they had to have been playing to go through that 2-month skid that they did and still win 95 games? That was... You could watch like my brother's a Minnesota Twins fan. He has never in his life seen a run by the Minnesota Twins the way the Philadelphia Phillies started this season. And I think we look past that and we get so caught up with the result that we don't realize how much the journey should probably mean to us as well. So that's something we should be thankful for. We should be thankful for Dave Dombrowski and the way that he brings people into this organization. Also the way he promotes from within, like moving Preston Mattingly up to GM, from director of minor league operations or minor league talent, I think was his actual title. Moving Sam Fuld to the business side so he could potentially learn more to take over for Dave Dombrowski one day. You've got a guy that knows how to build a roster. And while John Middleton supplies the money, Dave Dombrowski supplies the decision-making. So you should absolutely be thankful for that. And we should be thankful for a coaching staff that, I know this is going to sound crazy, but we should be thankful for a coaching staff that does get a lot out of these guys. They might not get the most out of these guys, but trust me, this is a coaching staff that you could do significantly worse than. I'm just like, on Thanksgiving, I'm not trying to give you all this Phillies propaganda. This is not, well, the organization is awesome and can do no wrong. No, man, they absolutely messed up at the end of last year in that series against the New York Mets, and the bullpen was terrible and the offense was quiet, and that was another awful end to a season. I'm not telling you to like not be annoyed with them over that. But what I am saying is this is one of the few days a year, a special holiday where you get to take a step back and kind of evaluate what you should be thankful for. And if you're a Philadelphia Phillies fan, there's still plenty to be thankful for, even though last season did not end the way that you wanted. Now, what I will say is I feel like I did a much similar show, or a very similar show, I should say, last Thanksgiving when they lost to the Diamondbacks. And I was like, oh, they're still a good team. I'm not going to do many more of these if they keep collapsing in the postseason. But for the time being, they still have the grace of being a really quality baseball team. And that should make you sleep easy at night if you are a Philadelphia Phillies fan. But something that might not allow you to sleep easy at night is the backup catcher situation. We're finishing up our evaluation of players on the team. And the last guy that we have to evaluate that was truly like a member of this team enough in 2024 to really get that evaluation is Garrett Stubbs. And we know he's going to be back in 2025. Now, we don't know what capacity, but we're going to evaluate his 2024 season. Why, people were right to be very, very concerned about the potential of him being the backup catcher once again in 2025. We'll break it down as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about FanDuel first, though, because you need to be ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. They got everything you need. So right now, you got the Chiefs and Raiders probably playing. If I'm going to post this on Friday, you got Black Friday football, Chiefs, Raiders. Go ahead and turn that on the TV. Bet something on that. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So throw the first $5 on something that's a lock. Get that $150 in bonus bets, and then go crazy with what you can bet on. There's so much you can do. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, this should be fun and civil and respectful. We're going to evaluate Garrett Stubbs' 2024 season. Now, he's the last guy to get to because when you look at the outfield depth, there was such a revolving door. Like, I'm not going to evaluate Christian Pache, who's no longer with the team. I'm not going to evaluate David Dahl. Austin Hayes is already gone. There's just not that many guys to break down as far as positional depth, and I'm not going to go into guys that are going to most likely be minor leaguers or guys that are no longer with the organization. So Garrett Stubbs is the last guy we're going to evaluate. I'll tell you coming up next segment, part of the schedule going forward and how we're going to round all of that out. But so Stubbsy, man, he finished his third season here in Philadelphia, and it was not a good one. His numbers have just significantly decreased since his first year in Philly. So his first year in 2022, he played 46 games and had 121 plate appearances. That wasn't too small of a sample size compared to recent years. In 23, he played 41 games, 125 plate appearances. This past year, he played 54 games, 187 plate appearances. Those numbers up a little bit because JT Realmuto had that minor knee surgery in the middle of the season. So in 2022, Garrett Stubbs hit .264. On base percentage of .350, slugging .462. He had 14 walks and he had 5 home runs and 16 RBIs and a couple of stolen bases. And you're like, this guy is solid backup catcher. Feel good about that. And then in 2023, he hit .204 and he hit 1 home run and he had 9 walks. So that number went down. Had nearly as many strikeouts as he did the year before, but that's fine. I mean, he wasn't a huge strikeout guy either of those seasons, but he just wasn't good enough in 2023. So the thought was in 2024, well, this fan base is already kind of out on Garrett Stubbs. And part of the narrative of Garrett Stubbs that you need to be aware of is the fact that in the 2023 NLCS, he did make comments about celebrating in the pool at the Arizona Diamondback Stadium out there at Chase Field if the Phillies win the NLCS and advance to the World Series. And then the series kind of went downhill from there. And everyone blames him for opening his mouth and firing up the Diamondbacks. And I understand that. And there was also already this vitriol from the fan base because he's batting .204 and he's undersized and he plays the music in the clubhouse, so everyone treats him just like a glorified DJ, and I don't think that's fair for Garrett Stubbs. What I will say is fair is he was not good in 2023, and that carried on to 2024. This past year, he had 207. He had 50 strikeouts on 187 plate appearances, 164 at-bats, 34 hits. Listen, that's just it's not ideal to put together, and the power numbers, they're just not there. This is kind of wild. Each of the past 3 seasons in Philadelphia, he's had 4 doubles and a triple. So you can almost put him down in Sharpie for 4 doubles and a triple every year. But that was, again, the numbers. And then 1 home run. So it's not like he was creating power. 11 RBIs, which was down again. He did have 5 stolen bases, so maybe he's getting faster. But batting 204 and 207 in back-to-back years is not going to get it done. That's not good enough. That's basically an auto out. And you can't have that if JT Realmuto is going to have a cutback in time behind the plate this year. That's unacceptable for the Philadelphia Phillies to trot Garrett Stubbs out there after 2 straight seasons of batting 207 and 204. Like, it would be negligent to have him as the major league catcher. Or, sorry, the major league backup catcher. You have to do better than that. But the Philadelphia Phillies tendered him a contract, and everybody lost their mind because they're like, how are you going to bring back a guy that can't hit the broadside of a barn? Now, one thing I will say for Garrett Stubbs, he is still solid defensively. People don't give him enough credit for what he does defensively. His pop time is impressive. He handles the pitching staff really, really well. He is a guy that can be behind the dish. You just can't be at the plate. You're not going to DH for a catcher. So you need to have a guy that can hit it a little bit better than that in order to have a true, like, not a time split, because JT Realmuto still got to start more than whoever's the backup catcher. But if you're going 75-25 as far as a split in playing time, Garrett Stubbs ain't good enough. And that was evident from his 2024 season. And it was bad. It was just like, it was flat out an ugly season for Garrett Stubbs on the back of another ugly season where the fan base is just, they're tired of the guy. And it's crazy. If you had told me in 2022 this fan base is going to turn on Garrett Stubbs, I would have been like, how? He's the backup catcher. He doesn't even play that much. That's something to remember. Like, what his role is going to play into my evaluation of his 2024 season. But anyone who was like, yeah, I feel like that guy stunk this past year, and I don't really want to see him as the backup catcher anymore. The numbers, well, they support your case. Garrett Stubbs was not a good Major League Baseball player in 2024. Now, again, I evaluate the entire player, and I do it without emotion in it. Like, you might say, well, Connor, you like Stubbs. It's not it at all. It's not whether or not I like the guy. I find a way to take myself out of the emotion of, like, this guy says this or he does this, or I don't like him because he plays certain music in the clubhouse or whatever, or he's the DJ. Like, no, I just look at objectively. I think he's a plus major league defender, right? Or I guess that's not objectively, but my opinion outside of, like, what I think of Garrett Stubbs as a person, I think he's a plus major league defender at the catcher position. Now, if that means 15 or 6 or 14 rather, because there's only 30 major league teams. I'm used to football standings at this point in the year. If that makes him like 14th as far as defensive catcher, that doesn't really mean he's amazing, but he's pretty darn good defensively. He's pretty darn bad offensively. And he had a pretty darn bad year in 2024. I think those are all fair evaluation points. And if you disagree with that, you can let me know in the comments. But I don't know. I feel pretty strongly that that is a fair evaluation of Garrett Stubbs. Now, the letter grades are going to be interesting because the expectations for Garrett Stubbs seem to have been raised because he put himself in that conversation by making the comments he did against the Arizona Diamondbacks. But at the end of the day, you have JT Realmuto. If Realmuto did not need knee surgery this year, we probably would have seen another year of, like, I don't know, 40 games played for Garrett Stubbs and 120-some plate appearances, and we wouldn't have thought about it as much. But as fate may have it, JT Realmuto is getting old and had an injury this year. And you saw more Garrett Stubbs splitting time with Rafael Marchand. And Marchand looked better in a lot of ways than Garrett Stubbs. So the expectations kind of tricky. Here's what I'll say. Compared to his peers, other backup catchers or catchers around baseball. Garrett Stubbs this past year, I got to give him like a D minus. As close as you can get to a failing grade without actually failing. Like, you can't hit 200 at the major. Like, you can't do that. I don't care if you're a catcher. I don't care what position you play. You're not the world's greatest defender. You don't add pop. You can't do that. You were complete net negative at the plate. Like, his WAR, fittingly so, 0.1 for the 2024 season. Like, I don't know. He had opportunities. He did not take advantage of the opportunities. I'm giving him a D minus compared to his peers. But compared to his expectations with the Philadelphia Phillies, I'm going to bump that up to a D plus, right? Like, people get caught. Actually, I'll give him a C minus even. People get caught up with, oh, well, he's stepping in for JT Realmuto. We expect him to be good if he's going to open his mouth and play the music and stuff like that. You get caught up in the emotion of what Garrett Stubbs represents for this clubhouse and the era of Philadelphia Phillies baseball that you think of when you look at him. And that's always going to be associated with underachieving until they hoist the World Series trophy. And I think he shoulders a lot of the burden of that, which isn't fair to him as a baseball player. Now, I'm not saying he's an MVP candidate or anything, but I'm just saying, like, he's better than people give him credit for because you get too caught up in the emotional response to how he is as a clubhouse guy. And that's important to have, by the way, for a professional baseball team. So I'm going to give him a C minus for expectations. Expectations would have been probably like, I don't know, 215, 220. He hit 207. Not good, but not way, way below what you expected. But, like, that's the problem. You need a backup catcher with higher expectations. You need a guy to come in here that you're going to say, I expect this guy to hit 240 and to hit like 8 bombs. And to back up JT Realmuto and to not have as much of an offensive drop-off and probably be plus defensively as well. Like, it's a lofty task to be the backup catcher for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2025. And Garrett Stubbs is not up to it. But this past year, was he up to his role? He was underachieving, but it wasn't by, like, leaps and bounds. He just isn't that great of a baseball player. And he is a really good guy to have in the locker room, and the Philadelphia Phillies felt comfortable with bringing him back. And it might have been a mistake to do it last year. And this year they tendered the contract, and he may end up in AAA. So we'll see if he's even on the Major League roster. But the Phillies cannot have him as their backup catcher. Like, I will be very upset with them if Garrett Stubbs is their backup catcher in 2025. I don't think he will be. He was underachieving compared to his peers and compared to his potential this past year, and it was probably the last time you significantly see Garrett Stubbs with the Philadelphia Phillies Major League club, barring any type of crazy injury at the catcher's position this next year. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen. So, a disappointing year for Garrett Stubbs, but it's been a fun year for Locked On Phillies, and we're heading into the final month of the 2024 calendar year. So, coming up next, we're going to have a discussion about what December holds for the Major League Baseball offseason, and also for us here on Locked On Phillies, and how we're going to round out the final day of the month of November as well, because we've still got stuff to do to tie things up. So I'll explain to you what we're doing coming up as the offseason really gets into full gear as we continue today's episode, or rather wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. All right, so let's talk about, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? So I'm just getting a notification. Tommy Edman is signing with the Los Angeles Dodgers. What are we even doing here? Tommy Edman gets $74 million from the Los Angeles Dodgers on a 5-year extension. How do I still have money? Whatever. Bottom line is the offseason is going to get going, and we're going to have to look at a lot of signings, not just by the Dodgers, but by a lot of teams around baseball. This is where things are starting to heat up. And once you get to the winter meetings, which come up next week or next weekend, you're going to have a lot of stuff to break down as far as free agency that I'm going to do for you. And that's why coming up to start December, we're going to get into the free agent hierarchy. We're going to run down the big names you need to know and evaluate all of them as potential fits for the Philadelphia Phillies. But you might say, Connor, you promised you were going to evaluate like the coaching staff and the GM and stuff like that. We're going to still do that. So we have one more episode for the month of November here on Locked On Phillies. I'm going to go ahead and post that on Saturday. So on November 30th, you'll get that. And we're going to evaluate the coaching staff. We're going to evaluate the general manager. So Dave Dombrowski, and we're just going to evaluate the team in general based on expectation and how they played out. So we're going to wrap up and put a nice little bow on all of our evaluations on the final day of November, December, not 1st, because 1st is Sunday, but December 2nd on Monday when we do our first episode of the month. We're going to start to get into that free agency evaluation. I guess we don't have to evaluate Blake Snell because he's already signed with the Dodgers, but we'll evaluate some of the big names. And honestly, we might just go down the top named free agents because the Philadelphia Phillies should be looking at just about all of them. If they're interested in adding a star like Buster Olney, who covers the sport, big-time MLB insider, said he firmly believes the Philadelphia Phillies are going to make a big-time star acquisition, then we might as well start at the top. So we'll just run down the list of top free agents, and we'll take a look at who fits and who doesn't and how that works, and then we'll be reacting to news over the course of the remainder of the offseason of the signings that do happen for other teams and for the Philadelphia Phillies. Something important to note. So the way we handle things here at the Locked On Podcast Network is we do also have off-season scheduling, which means we're going to go from December 15th, so the second half of the month of December, we're going to go down to 3 episodes a week. So don't worry, you'll still get your content, but it'll just be because there's a little bit less news to take you behind the curtain a little bit. So this month truly starts our off-season scheduling. So the next couple weeks, we're still going to be 5 episodes, Monday through Friday. You'll be able to get Locked On Phillies content, but that's going to cut down for a little bit. Hopefully you understand, considering that there's not as much to talk about in the off season. So we'll get to that the second half of December, and that'll roll through till February when pitchers and catchers start to report, and then we'll get back after it. So it's not too long of a time. Don't worry about it. We are in those cold winter days, though, where it feels like baseball is far away in both directions. Feels like it's been forever since the World Series. Feels like it's going to be forever until spring training and everything gets going again. But don't worry, we're here with you all the way through with Locked On Phillies. So in that time where we're cutting down on episodes, we're going to continue to evaluate free agents. But we're also going to put together some trade scenarios, and we're going to look to have some interviews and stuff like that coming in from guys like Lindsey Crosby, who talks prospects all the time on the Locked On MLB channels. And we'll talk about Andrew Painter. We're going to talk to some teams around the NL East and what they're looking at in the offseason and how they're worried about the Phillies. So there's going to be a lot of great content still coming your way. And you got the winter meetings, you're going to have the Rule 5 draft. You're going to have all of these different points of you know what it is when you play MLB The Show, if you've ever played that, and you simulate through and you see all those dates with stars on it where it says, are you sure you want to keep simulating? And you just simulate through because you're not an actual GM. You don't want to go to the winter meetings or any of that crap on there. Well, Dave Dombrowski does, and that's what he gets paid to do. So we're not simulating through any of that this offseason. And we'll see. I think December is going to be a very big month for determining what type of team the Philadelphia Phillies will have in 2025. They're going to look to make trades relatively soon after the winter meetings. That's going to be a time that always greases the wheels of the offseason and gets the presidents of baseball operations and GMs together, and they have these conversations in person. They're forced to have dialogue about players that are available. Post-winter meetings is when a lot of signings start to come down because, remember, agents are going to be there wandering around talking to front office executives. So that's just about a week away. Keep tuned because December is one of, if not the biggest months of the Major League Baseball offseason. And then in January, a little bit less so as we draw closer to spring training. But these next 30-some days are going to be when the offseason really gets laid out and the framework gets put together of what the Philadelphia Phillies are going to do in 2025. So a big stretch coming, and it feels like we have already had a big stretch for the Philadelphia Phillies where they're making these decisions and putting players on the trade block and all of this stuff. Listen, I don't know how the Philadelphia Phillies come out of this offseason. I don't know if they're a better team. I don't know if they're a worse team. I don't know if they're a World Series contender or if they're just a team that you say, well, go win the division and we'll see what happens. But what I do know is that it's going to be an interesting offseason for the Phillies. And last year, it really wasn't. They didn't really do all that much. Whit Merrifield was the big signing. That ain't going to be how this year goes. There's going to be guys potentially traded. There's going to be big-time signings. It sounds like the Philadelphia Phillies, from the whispers that are going around baseball, they're trying to make significant changes. So if you're a fan of running it back, well, you might not get your wish like you did last year. If you're a fan of them switching things up because it hasn't really worked, you may get your wish. And to round out this episode that I'm recording on Thanksgiving, that's something that you want to be thankful for. If you're someone who wants to see change with the Philadelphia Phillies organization, they're trying. We'll see what the next month holds. And tomorrow we'll wrap up with evaluations and finally close the book on the 2024 season. But we're closing the book on this episode. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for joining us. We come to you every day as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. See, it's in the name. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff. That really helps us out. You're on Locked On Phillies. And I will talk to you tomorrow on our next episode. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.